The man sitting in Alex Eala's coaching box in Washington has already lived this exact story once before, decades ago, on the other side of the world, with someone else's career on the line. Go back far enough and you land on a hard court in Palma de Mallorca. A teenage Carlos Moya is drilling cross courts. Standing next to him is a young Spanish PE graduate who just started working as an instructor at the Balearic Government School. That instructor is Joan Bosch. Nobody in that gym is thinking about Grand Slams. But within a few years, Moya wins the 1998 French Open, climbs to world #1, and Bosch ends up in his coaching box for 7 years, collecting Masters titles in Cincinnati and Rome along the way. That is the first act of this man's career. And most people covering Eala's rise have absolutely no idea it happened. Here's why that matters. The mainstream framing of Eala's Washington title run treats her coach like a footnote, a name mentioned once in a broadcast graphic and never revisited. You cannot explain how a 21-year-old from Rizal, Philippines went from outside the top 150 to a WTA title in 18 months without understanding who has been standing next to that court the entire time and what he already knew about building a champion before he ever met her. If this is the kind of story you've been waiting for someone to actually tell properly, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This channel goes deeper than the highlights every single week. Now let's get into it. Joan Bosch never had a famous playing career to trade on. He built his entire authority from the classroom side of the sport, graduating as a PE teacher from Alberto Giménez University, then becoming a national tennis instructor certified through the Royal Spanish Tennis Federation. That is not the resume of someone who stumbled into elite coaching. That's someone who had to actually explain why a shot works, rather than simply pointing to his own trophy case and expecting a player to trust him on instinct, and his coaching lineage runs through one of the most demanding environments in the history of the sport. Before Moya, Bosch trained alongside a young Rafael Nadal and worked under Tony Nadal at the Balearic School of Sport, back when that operation was still building the machine that would eventually produce 14 French Open titles. That is the environment Bosch's philosophy comes from: relentless baseline tennis, mental discipline drilled from adolescence, an obsession with court positioning over raw shot making. Then he spends 7 years refining a different version of that with Moya. Then he coaches Jaume Munar, a player who reached a career-high ranking of 33, built almost entirely on physicality and patience rather than flash. 3 separate careers, 3 different eras, 1 consistent coaching signature: durability first, brilliance second. This is a coach who has spent close to 3 decades in professional tennis without ever once being the player people paid to watch. He's the man in the third chair, the one whose name appears deep inside a feature story rather than on the trophy. And yet every single player who spent serious time under his guidance got more durable, not flashier, under his hand. Moya didn't become world #1 by out-hitting everyone. He became world #1 by outlasting opponents on clay, grinding out 5-set wars that broke players physically before he ever broke them tactically. Munar's game is built exactly the same way. Unspectacular on a highlight reel, brutally effective over 3 hours. The through line across Bosch's entire career isn't a signature shot or a tactical system. It's a single conviction: the match belongs to whoever is still standing at the end of it. Now watch the Washington final through that exact lens. Eala loses the first set 6-4 to Jessica Pegula, the tournament's top seed and the world #3, in a match suspended overnight by rain and lightning. Most 21-year-olds losing a rain-delayed set to a top 3 player come back the next day tight, second-guessing every decision. Eala comes back and wins the second set 6-4, then closes it out 6-0 in the decider. That is not talent suddenly showing up. That is a player who spent 3 years being coached by someone who built his entire career around exactly this scenario, staying physically and mentally intact long enough for the other player to break first. The question everyone should be asking is not how did Eala win the title. The question is, why does she keep winning the third set? And the answer has been sitting in her coaching box the whole time. If that breakdown just reframed the Washington run for you, drop a like on this video right now. It helps more people find this story, and a story this size deserves the widest possible audience. But here is where the narrative gets more complicated than the clean mentor story suggests. Bosch was not brought in as some proven star maker with a Grand Slam trophy case under his own name. He spent years as a secondary figure, an academy instructor, a background presence, someone who helped build other people's champions without ever being the headline himself. He had been circling Eala's development long before he became her full-time coach. She arrived at the Rafa Nadal Academy at age 12, left her family behind in the Philippines to do it, and won Les Petites as in France that same year. one of the clearest early signals in junior tennis that you're looking at a real prospect. By 2022, she had beaten Lucy Havlova in the US Open Junior Final and become the first Filipina to win a junior Grand Slam singles title. Bosch was already one of the senior figures inside the academy, shaping how the most promising juniors were developed, listed to this day as an under-18 coach within that system. 3 years ago, he took over Eala's day-to-day coaching. At that point, she had no tour ranking to speak of and no evidence on paper that any of it would translate at the professional level. Think about what that decision actually costs a coach at his stage of a career. He had already coached a Masters champion. He had already been part of the machinery at one of the most respected academies in the sport. There was a safe version of this story where Bosch stays inside that structure indefinitely, collects a stable salary, and never risks his name on an unproven teenager from a country with almost no established WTA pipeline. Instead, he tied his career specifically to Eala at the exact moment her results gave him no concrete evidence the bet would pay off. 3 years later, he is standing in Washington, D.C., the only member of her coaching staff on site, watching her beat the world number 3 in a deciding set. Eala's own words afterward, "Joan, who's here with me, is my confidant. I trust him a lot." He said, "I just have to keep going because if I'm there for every ball, I'll have my chances," and I did. That is not coach speak. That is a player describing the exact mechanism of how she wins matches coming directly from what he told her to do. What strikes me most about Bosch's public comments is how little of it is about technique. Even when the tennis substance is clearly there in how he talks about her reading pace on the return, most of what he says is about the psychological weight she carries. During her Wimbledon run, he told reporters that she doesn't play only for herself, she plays for the Philippines, and that he can see it in how her fans respond to her everywhere she travels. He went further, saying that for some players, this kind of national weight becomes a source of extra pressure. But Eala seems to thrive in that situation instead of buckling under it. Coming from a man whose entire career is built around managing pressure across 3 decades and 3 different players, that is not a throwaway observation. That is a diagnosis. And it explains something that the raw results alone don't fully capture. Eala went from outside the top 150 at the start of 2025 to inside the top 20 now, through a breakout Miami Open semifinal, a historic Wimbledon second week, and now a WTA title in Washington. That trajectory doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a coach who has already seen what a champion looks like under pressure recognizes it early enough to build around it. Here's what the Bosch pattern actually predicts going forward, and this is where it gets concrete. Every player he has developed long-term has improved most on surfaces that reward patience over flash. Moya's clay court dominance. Munar's entire ranking built on red dirt and slow hard courts. Eala's next stretch runs through the North American hardcourt swing directly into the US Open. Faster surfaces, less forgiving of long rallies, less suited to the grinding third-set formula that just won her WTA 500. If the Bosch pattern holds, expect her team to prioritize shortening points and taking more first-strike risk on serve over the coming weeks, rather than leaning on the same baseline durability that worked in Washington. That adjustment, not another slow court comeback, is what will tell us whether this coaching partnership can produce a deep run at a hard court major or whether it still has another level to find. Either way, the man in the coaching box has been here before. He has built a world number 1. He has spent 30 years making players harder to beat than they look on paper. And 3 years ago, he decided the next chapter of that story would be written by a 21-year-old from the Philippines. Washington just proved he was right. If this story changed how you see Eala's rise, subscribe to this channel and become part of the community following every chapter as it unfolds. We cover the tactics, the history, the people behind the players, the moments that actually explain what you're watching. Turn on notifications, and we'll see you in the next one.